As of May 2026, about 2 months after the conflict in the Middle East escalated, electricity prices for all of us have risen by about 2%. That's on the regulated tariffs, basically the standard electricity price set by the government-owned SP Group. You may think 2% isn't much, but the authorities are warning that electricity prices will continue to spike. That's even if the situation in the Middle East improves quickly. In the second part of Talking Points special on the energy crisis, I want to find out what it takes to keep the lights on in Singapore and what we can realistically do if high prices are here to stay. You might have seen videos and headlines like this.
Strait of Hormuz doesn't...
Strait of Hormuz, when people in the news...
In the Strait of Hormuz as oil...
Through the Strait of Hormuz.
Talking about the Strait of Hormuz is a narrow shipping route through which huge volumes of energy supplies pass through every day. But as of late February, conflict in the area has severely disrupted traffic passing through the strait, putting pressure on a route that the world depends on for energy. And that matters because disruption is pushing up not just oil prices, but gas too. About 95% of our electricity is generated using imported gas. Here's the thing. Today, some of that gas comes from neighboring countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, which means the gas comes from here, not through the Strait of Hormuz. The rest comes in the form of liquefied natural gas, LNG, which is basically gas that has been cooled into a liquid form so that they can be shipped here from much farther away. Some of that LNG comes from places like Australia and the United States. Again, not through the Strait of Hormuz. In fact, less than 10% comes from Qatar. So why then are electricity prices still going up? This is Jurong Island, where much of the gas that powers Singapore arrives. With me is David Chew, an analyst who studies gas and power markets. Qatar supplies only 10% of our natural gas, so why are electricity prices still going up?
Well, the main story here is competition really drives up prices. So if you look at who Qatar supplied LNG to, they would be looking for alternative cargoes as well. And that competition is what driving prices upwards.
So what you're saying is that there is competition for the available supply and competition will drive the prices up.
That's right. So Singapore has done a great job in terms of diversifying its portfolio of gas. So in that way, we have a better supply security than many other countries. But when you look at price, that ultimately is just a factor of the global market pricing. Secondly, the way that gas is priced, historically it's been tagged to a more mature commodity, which is oil. So because oil has been around for longer, gas was contracted to the oil price. So with oil prices climbing due to the conflict, you can see gas prices rising along with it.
We've been told that electricity prices will continue to climb. How much more can we expect?
For a time period maybe of 6 months, Singapore could expect elevated prices. So based on our assessments, we see about a $58 billion damage to the Qatar gas, which ultimately puts it in quite a big realm of supply disruptions. So because of that damage to infrastructure, you could see elevated prices for a longer period of time compared to just a supply chain issue.
So if let's say the war ends tomorrow, how long will it take before the Qatar facility can get back to business again?
So when you look at the Qatar facilities, our estimates range between about 3 to 5 years for them to fully bring back on that supply.
3 to 5 years?
3 to 5 years. So as of April 2026, SP Group is retailing electricity at about 27 cents per kilowatt hour. And this is really important because they haven't fully priced in the conflict, which only accounted for 2 weeks in March. So about a 10% increase may potentially be on the cards, which will bring tariff prices to about 30 cents per kilowatt hour, and that would be coming in the next tariff, in the next quarter.
The regulated tariff or electricity price set by Singapore Power is reviewed every quarter. Now the next one is in July, so do expect the rates to go up further. But in Singapore, households also have another option. They can also buy electricity from private retailers. If you switch to a retailer, you may pay a different rate from the regulated tariff. Most offers are fixed price plans, though some retailers may also offer rates packed at a discount to the tariff. But these rates aren't static. Retailers can revise prices for new sign-ups and renewals. There are currently 10 electricity retailers. In March 2026, after tensions in the Middle East escalated, some of the bigger ones adjusted their prices. Geneco and Keppel Electric raised their 24-month fixed plan from 27.68 to 28.8 cents per kilowatt hour. Sunoco Energy and Tuas Power increased their rates from 25.88 to 28.8 cents. Across these retailers, that's a jump of about 4 to 11%. Why are some prices rising more than others? To understand why electricity prices differ across the retailers, I'm going straight to the source, literally.
This yellow and blue structure is where our natural gas actually comes into our plant and it combusted to produce electricity and then injected into the grid to send to the household in Singapore. Okay. Come, let me show you around.
Are we getting on the buggy?
Yeah.
This is one of Singapore's main power stations. It's run by YTL Power Seraya, the parent company of Geneco, one of Singapore's biggest electricity retailers.
We should first try to understand what are the key components in the electricity tariff. So one of the main components, about 75% of them, is actually the fuel cost to generate the power. And after generating the power will be distributed to the household through the grid. So the second biggest component in the electricity tariff is actually the grid charges.
Why is it that some electricity price plans have gone up more than others?
It's really about how each and every retailer, together with their generator, secure the kind of gas price that they have, how they go about hedging. In Singapore, the generators actually buy natural gas at different timing. So with that different price that we have for our natural gas, every company will have a very different cost structure depending on how they hedge and depending on when they buy the natural gas. It's very similar to you trying to change different currency. If you look at it, exchange rate changes every day, right? If you want to lock down the rate, you can actually go to a money changer to actually lock down the rate. So similar for us, because our gas price fluctuates, actually we can go to traders to actually lock down the price of our gas. And that is what we call hedging. As a result of different strategy and different risk appetite, all generation companies would have a different cost structure arising from that. And if you are a customer who has signed up a month ago on the 24-month plan, all these crises or Middle East will not have affected you because as a retailer, we have guaranteed you the fixed price throughout the next 24 months period, and therefore the impact will only arise when they next have to renew their price plan.
For someone trying to choose an electricity price plan now, what should they really be comparing?
I think when the consumer like yourself wants to choose the different price plan, it also depends a lot on your personal risk appetite. If you stay on the regulated tariff, you are subject to the quarterly revision. It could be higher, it could be lower. If you want peace of mind, you want certainty in terms of rate, a 12-month or even a 24-month will be great for you. Then you do not have to worry during this 24 months period what happened to the fluctuation in the international oil price. Yeah.
Okay. Hedging strategies are commercially confidential, but what we do know is that when retailers do not hedge enough, it can lead to the collapse of smaller retailers, like what happened in the UK in 2021, leading to millions of consumers being booted off their cheap plans onto more expensive ones.
We are taking active steps to strengthen our energy and supply chain resilience.
We have stockpiles. We are stable for now.
What matters is that we have sufficient buffers and contingency plans in place.
Singapore has energy reserves of diesel and natural gas. One of the places they're stored is at the LNG terminal, where imported liquefied natural gas is kept before it's converted back into gas and used to generate electricity. So there is no immediate supply shortage. But if this crisis worsens, how serious would the disruption have to be before Singapore starts tapping into those reserves? Jessie Chin is part of the team managing the impact of disruptions in LNG supplies. Singapore has said that we have a few months' worth of fuel reserves for electricity generation. Worldwide, there is a competition for these resources. How much of a premium has Singapore had to pay for what we've managed to secure?
Well, the premium can be seen in the global gas prices themselves. Just to give you a sense, before the war, they averaged about maybe $10. Right now, they're sitting at about $15, which suggests that the premium itself has gone up by about 50%.
So Singapore has been making a lot of effort to secure sources of natural gas as well as LNG. Does this mean that these new supplies will go into our reserves?
Actually, it will not go into our reserves because we have had the reserves now here for some time. What these alternative sources are for, in the first instance, are to meet regular ongoing energy needs.
So what you're saying basically is that these cargoes of natural gas and LNG that's coming in from different parts of the world, it's really just to generate electricity for me to work from home, for me to keep my fridge running, and for me to make sure that I have hot water when I shower.
But going ahead, I think it's a reminder to all of us that we cannot solely depend or remain largely dependent on imports. So you might be aware of, for example, efforts on deploying more solar panels here in Singapore. There are other low-carbon sources that EMA is closely studying. So these will include things like geothermal sources, carbon capture, utilization and storage, and even nuclear energy is an option for us.
But these options are still some way off. Geothermal, advanced nuclear are all still being studied, which means none of them is likely to be a near-term fix. For the rest of us, I want to know what we can do now. With electricity prices going up, I want to know what I can do to save some money. This is Eugene Chia. His household uses about 170 Singapore dollars of electricity per month. In 2025, his startup developed a system to help schools and commercial buildings track and optimize their energy use. It shows exactly how much electricity individual appliances are using. But since he expects his bills to rise, he's installing these energy monitoring devices in his own home. Incidentally, Eugene stays in Pasir Ris. EMA's data shows 3 HDB towns topping the list for household electricity use. Woodlands at number 3, Choa Chu Kang at 2, and taking the top spot, Pasir Ris. That's because Pasir Ris has larger households which naturally use more electricity.
You've noticed that we actually installed a new DB box. So this gives us a circuit level mapping of how much energy my house is actually drawing. So that tells me the AC, lights and fans of different rooms, as well as a large overview of how much plug load energy is being consumed. For this experiment, we really want to go down to the granular at the appliance level, how much electricity the appliance is actually drawing. So we actually have a smart plug to help us.
Eugene will be monitoring his electricity usage closely for a week, and I'll be checking back on him to find out how I can manage my own usage. Since 2008, Singapore has been betting on solar. Across Singapore, solar panels like these are already appearing on HDB rooftops and public buildings. But for now, solar still makes up only a small part of the overall electricity mix. In the first half of 2025, solar accounted for just 2.5%. That is still well below land-constrained places like Malta and Cyprus, where solar accounts for a much larger share of electricity generation. Can we do better? with me is a man some call Mr. Floating Solar. He is one of the key architects behind this floating solar farm. This farm can generate enough electricity to power roughly 16,000 four-room HDB flats a year. We are projecting for solar energy to provide up to 10% of Singapore's total energy needs by 2050. Are we moving fast enough?
So we are probably the most solar-dense city in the world even, but we will always have constraints about space and how to overcome the challenge with space constraints. And I think that's where also new technologies can come in, because that opens many more deployment options which we may not even see today.
Many cities in the world have space constraints. What are we doing to overcome this constraint as compared to them?
I think Singapore is one of the leading countries when it comes to deployment of solar panels in an urban context. Rooftop solar, this is what's happening already today. But we have to think out of the box. Can we use the facades of a building? Can we overarch car parks, which has a side benefit even that the cars don't heat up that much? Can we overarch flood canals? Can we overarch existing infrastructures without interfering in the originally intended use of that infrastructure?
At the moment, we are making use of rooftops.
Yes.
But that's not good enough because there's plenty of open spaces. You mentioned walkways that we can cover with.
So we are currently looking into and doing quite a fair bit of research on new thin film technologies. They can be as light as a foil, and then you don't need massive structures anymore, which you need today for conventional solar panels. This is something where we can overarch vast spaces with very lean technologies, which can also be aesthetically pleasing, elegant.
How far away is this future?
Probably 5 to 10 years from now. The technology is already being developed. We will see first test beds in the next few years.
So even if we were to be really creative and maximize all the spaces that we have, realistically, how far can solar energy take us?
At the moment, we don't have an actual number for that because we are doing a reassessment of the assumptions, but we expect that it will be much more than the 10%.
So I've learned that in very densely populated cities like Tokyo, the government has made certain moves. In 2025, they passed a new law that says that certain new buildings, it's mandatory for them to install solar panels. Are we committed enough at that government level? Can we go in that direction?
I think the government is doing an outstanding job and by walking the talk. Most of the installations at the moment in Singapore are actually also driven by government initiatives through the Solar Nova project, for example. Almost every HDB block now has solar PV on the roof. That has been extended a few years ago to all other government agencies.
Hey, Eugene.
Hello, hi Daniel.
Hi. Okay. So, Eugene, it's been a week. What is the findings that most surprised you?
Well, Diana, have you heard of vampire energy?
Vampire energy? No.
So vampire energy is basically energy that is being wasted and money thrown away because you're not actually benefiting from the energy use. So actually, from the 1 week of data collected, we've actually have some surprising findings. And let me show you one of the biggest culprits.
Oh, wow, okay.
Okay. Smart TVs that are connected to the network, about 5 to 10% of energy are actually being wasted, even when we've switched off the TV using the remote and no one is watching.
How is the electricity being wasted?
The TV is on standby and still feeding off the energy.
How much does that translate into electricity bills?
Yep, so that translates into about $4.70 a month.
So what is the solution?
So after you're done watching the TV, you should just switch it off with the remote and then just go behind the TV and switch the switches off.
But in my household, the main switches are quite concealed into the cabinet. So what can I do?
So one solution that people can have, right, is they can buy smart plugs. These smart plugs work by identifying if your devices are on idle, and if they are on idle, it would just cut off energy, and hence it would be zero consumption. These typically cost $10 to $40, and the price difference comes from the type of features that are inside the plug, the ratings, and safety credentials as well. The next big culprit of vampire energy would be the water dispensers. These water dispensers consume quite a bit of energy. The model that I have at home, it doesn't have a hot and cold water function, so it generally idles at about 3 to 4 watts. in order to maintain the temperature so that you have instant water. That means that there will be constant spikes in energy. Do you have a hot and cold water dispenser at home?
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, huge news for you. The hot and cold water dispensers at home typically consume more energy, have to be constantly reboiling, cooling the water, even though you're not actively dispensing water, so that you have instant cold or instant hot water. So what that means is that there will be more spikes in energy. So let's take a look at the graph, right? So you can see here, right, that it constantly spikes, it's about every 15 minutes that it does that, right? Up to 541 watts. So that's a massive amount of energy. And in a typical use case, that works out to about $10.70 a month. That is just flushed down the drain.
That's even more money.
Yes. So if there's no one else at home during the day, you could also turn it off before you leave for work.
So we haven't talked about the elephant in the room, which is the air conditioning unit. What did you find out?
Air conditioning in my household actually constitutes 60% of my total household bill.
No surprise there.
So what we actually found out was that while the indoor units were switched off, it was actually consuming vampire energy at 30 watts, which translates to just shy of $5 a month. So what you can do, for example, in my home, which is an older HDB flat, you can actually turn off the main switch that is easily accessible indoors. So it's actually a fuse switch with a red light indicator, right? It really looks like a water heater switch.
Okay, I don't have that in my house. So my main switch to my air conditioning units are somewhere very hard to access.
So if you don't have a main switch to your aircon in the house, that would mean that you can't cut off idle energy from your air conditioning system. But there are still ways that you can save energy, as we've discussed previously.
My household is different from yours, and I don't have one of the slick devices that you have. How would I know which are the appliances that are using up the most energy?
So there is a general rule of thumb. Typically, if the device or appliance is larger in size, it would typically consume more energy. And also, if it does cooling or heating, or is connected to a network, these devices would typically consume more energy.
Based on data shared by Eugene and his team, here are the savings for some other appliances. A sound bar saves about 27 cents a month, an air purifier 55 cents, a router or a washing machine just under $1. The water heater, when switched off at the mains, can save about $4 a month. Now, on their own, it doesn't seem much, but across multiple appliances, they do add up. So if you ask me, there is no magic fix. The trick is to be intentional and not pay for vampire energy when we're not using our appliances.